Good afternoon and welcome. So welcome to the fourth edition of the Value Chain Initiative Net Zero Value Chain Summit, Accelerating Collaborative Decarbonisation.
On behalf of the Value Chain Initiative, it is our honor to be here with all of you today and to kick off this fantastic event. How are you? How are you all? Yeah? Good? Great to see this excitement. Also because we are coming from a whole morning talking about food and ag, supply shed, emission factors, and it's nice to have this kick in the afternoon. So we also hope you enjoy the coffee, and with that we would like to thank our sponsor for the coffee break, which is Agrina. Thank you, Agrina. I'm not sure if any of the team are here, but thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So today, Francesca and I will be your main host for this afternoon. Before we start, let us introduce ourselves. So first, Francesca Palamidessi is our passionate head of engagement of VCI. She spends most of her time collaborating and engaging with VCI members and key stakeholders to ensure alignment with the ecosystem and the success of the VCI.
On my side, I'm thrilled to introduce Silvana Paniagua Tufinio, my dear partner in crime. Silvana is our VCI technical director, and she spends most of her time scrapping her head to find solutions to the barriers VCI members encounter in Scope 3. So, to kick off our event, we would like to invite Marion Verles, the CEO of SustainCert. And Marion is a climate and sustainable development entrepreneur. Marion co-founded SustainCert and was previously CEO of Gold Standard Foundation. And as you all know, the VCI was co-founded by SustainCert and Gold Standard, and SustainCert is hosting the Secretariat. So without further ado, Marion, welcome to stage.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you, Silvana. Welcome all to the Net Zero Value Chains event. We're going to talk about accelerating collaborative decarbonization. So why are we here today? Any idea, specifically? So I'll give you a hint. It's not about us. It's not about us because we're all going to be fine. So if it's not about us, then why are we here? Well, earlier this week, the Summit of the Future adopted the Pact for the Future. And in doing so, they put at the center of the discussions on how are we solving today's challenges the voices and perspectives of future generations. And that's why we're here today. It's not about us, it's about the world we're handing over to our children and their children. It's about us making the decisions and taking the actions we need to take to hand over a just, sustainable, livable planet. So what does it have to do with value chains? Well, handing over a just, safe, livable planet to our children hinges on our ability to transform the economic system. What we produce, what we consume, how we make money. And I was really interested to read, actually, in the Science-Based Target Initiative paper that was published in July, one sentence. I mean, there were many sentences that took my attention, but one sentence I particularly loved, which says that Scope 3 target setting and Scope 3 action is about bringing in our economic system our global climate goals. This is what value chain action is about. It's about transforming the way we produce, what we consume, and how we make money. And that's why we're here today. The issue, though, and we all know about that, is that Scope 3 action is really hard. It's difficult for a number of reasons, access to data, lack of control. But it's also really hard because it requires corporates and players in that space to engage in collaboration at a level that we're not used to. We need to move beyond superficial collaboration and really start co-designing, co-financing, co-claiming Scope 3 impacts. We need to co-create the rules of the game the accounting rules and requirements that will make it possible for all of us collectively to accelerate action. And that is really, really hard. It's not in the DNA of most organizations, be they for-profit or non-profit. And since 2017, as Francesca was alluding to earlier, the Value Change Initiative has been working on solving those challenges. And that's why it's such an important initiative that Sustain30 is very proud to be the secretariat for. So guided by Value Change Initiative members, we co-create the solutions to those problems, and we offer a space. The VCI is offering an essential space for those discussions to happen, for the rules of the game to be discussed, debated, and ultimately agreed, and for action to be designed. So it's really heartening to see all of you here in New York today. I know there's many, many events, lots of competition, but I'm very glad to see new and known faces joining us for this event on accelerating collaborative decarbonization. So what do we have on the agenda for this afternoon? Well, we'll start with an esteemed panel discussing the standards setting developments. So what is happening on the side of standards to accelerate Scope 3 action? And I'll have the privilege of moderating this panel. Before we do that, our amazing host, Francesca and Silvana, will tell you more about the VCI initiative sort of plan for the next months and how you can engage. And we'll also have a panel discussion where corporates taking action will share with you their plans, hopes, challenges when they engage in value chain action, in co-claiming and co-financing those Scope 3 impacts. And before we head for well-deserved drinks, we'll make you work a little bit, otherwise it's not fair. Everyone has to work a little bit. So we'll have a workshop session where we'll ask for your feedback and input on a letter that the Value Change Initiative is going to take to COP. So aligning on what are the key asks and key expectations that we can put to world leaders when they agree on a new round of climate negotiations at the end of the year. So that will be the little homework before we can head to the drinks, and hopefully it won't be raining and we will all be able to enjoy the amazing rooftop on the next floor. Thank you very much again for being here. I hope you enjoy the conversations and you use that as a space to co-create the future that we all want to hand over to our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marion, for the opening words and for giving us a bit of inspiration to start this event. So, speaking about the VCI, for those of you who are new to the VCI, we are a forum of practitioners that brings together companies, technical experts, solutions providers, standards, and frameworks on a mission to achieve net zero value chains. With a focus on implementation, we work together to solve cross-sector and sector-specific Scope 3 accounting challenges and create a pathway to unlock collective action at scale. And since 2017, actually, we have built a whole movement, I would say, because we have achieved more than 100 members, I think 110 to be precise, and more than 550 participants. So I'm just gonna give a shout out to all our members and really thanking them for supporting us and enabling us to be here and continue working.
So, a little bit about our journey. So, we started back at 2017 as a small program with around 10 organizations. In 2021, we launched the official initiative. Since then, we have published more than 6 guidance documents across the food and ag sector, the apparel sector, but also in topics such as claims, systems, and certification. We built this throughout 15 work streams focused on category 1 of Scope 3, which is purchased goods and services.
And now, turning to you, we also would like to know a bit more about who you are and who is in the room. If you're here today in person or online, hi online participants, thank you for joining. It's because that you have a crucial role to play in tackling Scope 3. So perhaps you came here with your list of challenges, that can also be, or to propose solutions, or to continue learn from others and continue pioneering Scope 3.
So, with that in mind, we would like to hear a bit from you and see what you still believe is needed to advance the discussions today. So please grab your phones, go to highslides.com/VCI NYC, and you will find some questions. So let's go to the high slides.
Yeah. You all have it? All right. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Can we go back a little bit? Okay. Please, let's go to Ha. Thank you. So the first question, and I see that we already started, so why are you here today? So is it to hear the latest from the standard? Is it to hear perhaps insights on how to Scope 3? To learn more about other companies' best practices? To meet, share, and discuss with the Scope 3 peers, because I love supply chain. We all love supply chain, obviously. Or because I heard the VCI is the place to be.
All right. I think the first four are definitely winning. We cannot see how many. It's probably too many. But the supply shed emission factor and discussions are really growing, so I think that will be probably the winner. All right, thank you so much. Let's go to question 2. So for those of you who were here last year, we asked you the same question. So what we wanted to see is whether your challenges have changed from last year. So the question is about what challenges are still your top priorities in Scope 3. All right. So data. Is just staying at the center. Credibility of claims, traceability is quite big.
Yeah. Traceability and data.
Yeah. Demand.
Demand.
Let's see. Action. Alignment. Interventions accounting. Okay. I think some of you are still adding. Thank you.
Okay.
So interesting, to see actually what other people's challenges are, isn't it? Because then you have kind of a picture of what we need to work on. Great, thank you. So I think data is the winner with traceability, like top 2 challenges. And actually with the VCI, we had just a data lab this year. So probably we were aligned with the challenges that you all shared today. Great, let's go to question 3.
And as you notice, this year we have a very inspiring title, which is Accelerating Collaborative Decarbonisation. And we would like to know, what does that mean to you, right? So we have some options, such as shared investments, regulatory incentives, supply chain partnerships, technology-driven innovations, deploying market-based mechanisms, all of the above or none of the above.
Okay, so shared investments in value chain intervention, supply chain partnerships, deploying market-based mechanisms, all the above. Great, yeah, definitely. So this is really interesting, and we will definitely talk a bit about partnerships and investment, actually, in panel 2. And in panel 1, indeed, among standards update, we will also talk a bit about market-based mechanisms. Great, then last question. What type of organization do you represent? And hopefully we managed to put many categories, maybe not all, but there is also another category. So brand, manufacturer, standard, farmer, processor, regulator, international organization, technology provider, and other. Okay. Great. All right, lots of manufacturers and brands in the room, but also technology providers and international organizations. Yeah, really exciting. Thank you all so much for joining and participating in really getting to know who is in the room.
Thank you very much. So we go back. Thank you. Okay, so the focus of today. Today we're coming together as a community of Scope 3 pioneers in value chain decarbonization, united by our common goal of drastically reducing and removing emissions and tackling climate change through transformative and collaborative action. So we are here mainly for two reasons. So first, because we believe that we can solve most or at least some of the major challenges in Scope 3. And then, of course, because we do recognize that nobody can do this alone.
So to reach net zero, we must address this topic comprehensively. And this is why we have invited our international accounting and target reporting standards to hear on the latest updates and standards changes. We will also hear from some of our corporate members who will share the challenges, but also their best practices, and much more actually on what they are working on. And since last year's summit, we have been working really hard to solve some of the main questions that you all raised through our survey, through our sessions for the members, and many other different engagement occasions.
So, in 2024, we have been working with our members, global and technical partners, focusing on some of the major challenges hindering Scope 3 action.
So we have been leading discussions and created the space for experts to co-develop solutions to questions such as, 1, how can value chains measure and report impact when traceability is limited? 2, what is a pragmatic way to account for the impact of interventions in value chains? And 3, what are credible pathways to incentivize actions in value chains today?
So in order to get these solutions, we explored on a case-by-case basis the actionability of solutions such as the supply shed that is compliant to the sourcing region requirements by the land sector removal guidance so that companies can report progress even when traceability is limited. We also defined different emission factors such as the supply shed emission factor, the stratified emission factor, and the residual emission factor so that companies are empowered to understand the data they need to report in alignment with standards, enabling integrity, collaboration, and transparency. Finally, we continued the exploration of market-based mechanisms and allocation methods beyond standards. So, for example, we did dive into solutions to enable Scope 3 claims from crop rotation farming systems so that companies can understand scenarios and implications and are empowered to choose solutions that fit best their needs.
Yeah. And all this work has been possible thanks to the support of our partners and members, and because our work is redefining the Scope 3 landscape. So now let's look at what's coming and what's ahead of us.
So, what is next? We're proud to be building this Scope 3 movement, and with that, we want to strengthen our commitment to find solutions to the complexity of Scope 3. In 2025, as the landscape continues to adapt and evolve, we would like to focus on the following topics. So first and foremost, as BCI's mandate as well, central mandate, I would say, we would like to focus on the operationalization and alignment with main standards, such as the land sector removal guidance and the net zero value chain standard. We will also continue the exploration of accounting methodologies towards in-depth technical and pragmatic solutions, as we do with BCI. And then finally, we would like to continue our work in the exploration and further development of market-based mechanisms.
And all of these will enable and empower companies to still account, but also report progress towards their targets and enable a sustainable and functioning Scope 3, what we call it, ecosystem that fosters actions. And to achieve this, we are happy to announce, first and foremost, coming from this morning, our Food and Agriculture Working Group 5, which will kick off on November 13, and now we are open to receive applications. And this working group will be led by our colleague Naomi Montenegro Navarro, technical partner and manager at the VCI. Thank you, Naomi. And this group just wrapped up today with the session 5. It was really an exciting session, and we are now writing the output. So we are really ready now towards this next phase, really focusing on the implementation of the land sector removals guidance. Then we are also happy to announce the start of the 4th edition of the Apparel and Footwear Fibers Working Group. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, if the slides cooperate with me, yes. We are running the Apparel and Footwear Working Group already for a couple of years. And there has been lots of excitement, especially among cotton companies and many other brands, and also some retailers, actually. And we will continue working with the sector to really advance on the apparel value chains. Last but not least, we will also continue our cross-sector work through the Innovation VCI Labs. So this year we talk about data. This morning there was some discussion about mission factor. Yeah. So we will also happy to hear from you actually what your needs are. Probably data is also another one that came today, and traceability.
Yeah. In addition to this and to our active work streams, we also want to launch today a call for engagement, because we are interested in future work in 2 areas. So the first one is that we would like to keep exploring and gathering the evidence base for market-based mechanisms. So if you are interested, please let us know. So that's also our focus as with the VCI work is in the food and ag sector and the apparel sector. Also, we would like to bring focus on commodities and markets where dedicated Scope 3 work is needed in order to develop guidance, right? So please do, if you have an interest, if you want to explore collaborations, please reach out to us.
So now we are ready to kick off this event and call the speakers of the first panel on the stage. In this session, they will discuss the alignment and the evolution of standards and the crucial role value chain interventions play in the whole climate reporting and regulatory landscape, and hopefully harmonization. We will also look at the future as our experts will discuss strategies to improve data transparency, regulatory compliance, and consistency in climate reporting across industry. Please welcome Marion Verles, the moderator of the first panel.
Thank you very much, Francesca and Silvana. Clearly, the VCI has a full plate for next year. It's great. So I would love to welcome our panelists on stage, Mandy Rambarros, Alberto Carrillo, and Pankaj. Perfect timing, Pankaj. I was wondering you wouldn't make it on time, but you are. That's great. Please join us on stage. We're just starting. Great. Excellent. So we'll talk about the future of the accounting landscape for Scope 3 and value chain action. And I'm delighted to have with me Mandy, the new CEO of Vera. Welcome, Mandy. Pankaj, Global Director at the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and Alberto, Chief Technical Officer at the Science Based Target Initiative. So we have the right people to talk about and explore the future of Scope 3 accounting. So in this discussion, what I thought we could be doing is really focus on where we are today, what's happening within your respective standard-setting bodies, deep dive into flexibility instruments and how do we create the right incentives for corporate to take action, acknowledging that accounting is important and what we all want at the end of the day is action, impact. And then we'll close by reflecting on the future. What does success look like in a few years from now for all of us, and what can we, with our respective organizations, contribute to that collective success? So starting with setting the scene and where we are, I'd love to start with you, Pankaj, and hear a little bit about the Greenhouse Gas Protocol work plan. So when we were discussing last year at this event, we were talking about the solutions and the challenges that accounting creates for corporates. And you were telling us a little bit about flexibility instruments that could emerge to overcome some of those challenges. So a year later, we are here today, and there's a lot going on with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, so you're finalizing the LSRG guidance. I think there's a market-based mechanism working group that's kicking off. You're also going to revise Scope 1, 2, and 3 standards, so that's a lot. So before we talk about the specifics, I'd love to get the big picture from you and understand how will this all come together, and how do you plan to engage with other sort of fellow standard bodies in this space?
And thank you so much. I think, I sometimes really feel scared in having these discussions in the middle of a process that is still, sometimes we are trying to make progress while we're trying to fly while we're still building the plane. And it is somewhat like that. So I don't think I have answers to all your questions. And I worry if I might disappoint some of you a little bit, but I'll do my best to present a snapshot of where we are in the GHG protocol process. So just a quick reminder, we launched a multi-stakeholder survey process, I think about a year back or maybe more, to get feedback on our 3 major bodies of standards, corporate, Scope 2, Scope 3, and also to introduce a new body of work around what we call market instruments. We got very good feedback, excellent feedback, and we think that in general, the feedback has confirmed the effectiveness of the standards. Corporate accounting standard was published in 2004, we are in 2024, 20 years, and we did not see in the feedback a rejection or a major problem, except I think in the some important proposals on the consolidation approaches, and whether it's a time now to converge to a single consolidation approach instead of 3 that we have. So that's kind of giving you a flavor of what was the major emphasis in the corporate standard. Scope 2, we all know that market-based approach has been a big issue. When it was introduced in 2015 or so, it was successful. It was seen as actually mobilizing investments that were much needed at that time. But then the times have changed and practices changed. Initially, the large companies, and even now large companies, they follow the practice very well. But then we have been pointed out that there are a lot of loopholes and how that approach is not working well. And so clearly that will be under big evaluation, and revision process will look into that very well. And then there are some new developments, hydrogen as an energy carrier, 24/7 also. And so those kind of gives you a highlight of what we might see in Scope 2. Scope 3 is generally seen as working well, 15 categories. Nobody said you need 16th or take one out. So the category framework will stay. I think tremendous feedback on data quality, how to improve that, the inventory process, the transparency on the data quality. And then there's a lot of feedback on Scope 3 finance emissions category. I think that will see as a major uplift in the new standard. And so if you, of course, when you look at the documents that have been published, stakeholder surveys, summaries, is very detailed. And we think that, in a way, much of the progress that you will likely see in the updated text is kind of that there is a common thread that will come from the stakeholder summary. So a lot of the information that we have already shared will likely also then get reflected in the updated standards. The fourth area, the work stream actions and market instruments is how we call it right now, is a new body of work, and it's been being designed largely, I think, as we've heard a lot of feedback from companies that there are opportunities for them to make interventions, not only within the value chain, but outside the value chain, systemic impacts, avoided emissions that is outside the value chain. And then there is also quite a lot of progress, for example, biogas certificates, sustainable aviation fuel, and other environmental attribute certificates. generally, in the history of GHG protocol, when we come in to begin to standardize, already either by sectors, by industries, or by experts, the very rich set of publications on new methodologies are already making progress. And then there comes a time when stakeholders begin to see lack of standardization, lack of credibility, whether to believe that information or not that is coming out from these different methods. So I think part of the GHG protocol work on the fourth workstream will be to try to standardize terminologies across various types of market instruments, standardize the methodologies, build on some of the quantification methodologies that we already have, and to provide a unified framework. If unified framework that I like to speak about is a kind of a ledger accounting approach. So those who might know financial accounting, we provide different ledgers. For example, a ledger for inventories, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 is a ledger. So companies can transparently and accurately, completely report this ledger account based on GHG protocol. Now, there will be a standardized approach also on a new ledger, actions and market instruments, which will be reported as well, and GHG protocol will provide quantification guidance. Now, my final point, I think that perhaps will be the subject of the discussion today, is that how would companies, whether we will give some guidance to companies on how to use these instruments in their inventories or not. And we will not. We only provide ledger accounts. We will not, for example, tell you how do you net from one ledger into other ledger. How do you combine them? We don't do that, and we don't think it is within the scope of GHG protocol. We think that is the role of the programs, and there is a lot more additional policy objectives and programmatic objectives that need to be set in place. But even then, before programs can make judicious decisions, you need standardized accounting methodologies. In the absence of those standardized methodologies, and how do you report, you will not have those subsequent steps done properly also. And so that's my overarching kind of perspective, that we did make progress to publish the summaries of the stakeholder feedback. We have just recently completed the set of the new governance in the GHG protocol. I think many of you are aware that how there's a lot of scrutiny going on how we in the governing bodies make decisions, and whether there is some special influence opportunity given to some players and not others, and like that. So new governing bodies have been launched. Just yesterday, the first inaugural meeting of the steering committee happened yesterday, and so the whole process is now underway, and we will start meeting with technical working groups next month, and I should be able to even report further progress as the technical working groups make progress. In fact, this time we plan to publish summaries of all our working groups also, so that make it more public and transparent. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Pankaj, and I'd like to amplify two things you said at the start, which I think we don't say and talk about enough. The first one is that through your consultation, there was very strong confirmation of the value that the greenhouse gas protocol brings to that sector. So we need standards. And the second thing you said is that it's really difficult for a standards body to be on stage and talk about things that are being discussed, that are in the making. And I think the three of you are in this position today. And so I'd like to acknowledge that this is not an easy position, especially in the environment in which we operate. So thank you for being here, and thank you for taking on the job, because you, the three of you, have really, really difficult jobs. Leading a standard body is difficult. So thank you for being with us and sharing your perspectives, and we'll all understand that what you'll be sharing with us is still being discussed. It's not finalized, but we appreciate the effort and the openness to engage with us on those discussions. So turning to you, Alberto, and I acknowledge that I think Pankaj and Mandy are on your the SBTi Technical Council. So this is for you sort of a good position to be in. And so a bit similar to what we heard from Pankaj, there's a lot happening within the Science-Based Target Initiative. A number of papers were released in July. I think last week there was a terms of reference published for changes to the neutralization approach. You're working on an update to the net zero standards. So tell us a little bit about what is the big picture vision that you have behind those developments. What can we expect in 2025, and how does it complement what the Greenhouse Gas Protocol is working on?
Great. Thanks a lot, Marion, first of all, for the invitation. And thanks, everyone, for the attention, for the time, for the engagement as well. So I would say, well, and also first, thanks for the disclaimer at the beginning. You saved me one important aspect. Well, let me start with the big picture. 10 years ago, we were in Climate Week doing our initial consultation on the initial methodology that we were developing as part of Science-Based Targets Initiative. At the time, we were discussing what was the best approach to Scope 3 target setting, because the Scope 3 standard, the value chain standard of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol was still very new. Very few companies were using it. Very few companies were setting Scope 3 targets that were meaningful, and our original criteria for science-based target setting was a 2-pager that we launched in 2015, 6 months before COP21, when the Paris Agreement was adopted. And our initial criteria on Scope 3 was very high level. We were encouraging companies to set ambitious targets and to measure their emissions. That was our initial requirement on Scope 3. And of course, over time, things have evolved. We went through the process of iterating the initial criteria. We are currently in the 5th iteration of the initial criteria that were launched almost 10 years ago. 3 years ago, we launched the Net Zero Standard. And the Net Zero Standard and the corporate criteria for science-based target setting are the main documents that guide target setting in SBTi. Right now, we have around 6,000 companies that have set science-based targets. 97% of the targets that companies have adopted include Scope 3. And of course, with all of these, there's a lot of learning, right? And so as part of that, to basically reflect on the learning, companies going from the process of measuring their emissions, setting Scope 3 targets, and now going to the process of implementation of Scope 3 targets. We want to bring all of that learning into the revision process of the corporate net zero standard. The goal continues to be the same, which is to drive science-based climate action. But we want to really bring the learnings of the past 10 years and the past 3 years since the net zero standard was launched. There are 4 areas that we are looking at in particular as part of the revision of the corporate net zero standard. The first of these areas, and what I think relates to a lot of this discussion, is to evolve the standard from a standard that is setting ambition only towards a process that drives continuous improvement in companies. And so that involves basically assessing how targets are delivered and what that means for the next cycle of targets. And so that's one of the first key components, and that then requires to have more clarity about implementation, not only target setting. The second key component is about updating the methods and the pathways that underpin science-based target setting. There's also been a lot of learning with the methods. There was also the 6th assessment report that was launched over the past 2 years. And then we're updating the underlying pathways and methods that inform SBTi standards. We are also improving the interoperability of the standards. We want to align as much as possible with other frameworks. And so that's a third key component of the standard. And then, of course, also implementation of best practice since then. And those are the key aspects. As part of implementation of standards, we want to provide clarity in terms of how different instruments can be used. And that's basically the scope of the revision process. We are aiming to complete, well, right now we're in the drafting process of the standard. and we're aiming to complete this drafting towards the end of this year. And then we follow the process that we have in our standard operating procedures that involves first approval by review and approval by our technical council. Once the draft is approved, then it's published for consultation, and then depending on the feedback, we continue to iterate until we have a standard that is ready for market use, basically.
Thanks, Alberto, for walking us through your processes and the big picture, including the specific sort of 3 buckets of changes that we can expect from the net zero standard. A brief follow-on question, if I may, before I come to you, Mandy. So, Alberto, let's assume the net zero standard is published 2025, towards the end of the year, at some point. If I'm a food and agriculture company, that means I have maybe 3-4 harvests left before 2030, when I'm supposed to report on my target. What advice can you give to companies that need to make decisions now, like capital allocation decisions now? Am I going to finance change? Am I going to support those interventions if I don't know how those impacts will be accounted for in the future? It's very easy to say, no, I hold off my investments until I have clarity, but no, none of us want that. We need action and investment to flow now. So what advice can you give to companies that are facing that situation today?
Yeah, thanks. That's a difficult question, but I think all of us are engaged in this topic and in voluntary climate action because we want to make a difference, right? And so my first advice is definitely take action that you know is meaningful, that is driving transformation, because that's what we need. As Pankaj said, we are in a development stage, right? We have never gone to this transformation, and we need companies taking action so that we can bring those learnings into the standard setting processes. It's a very exciting time because there's different standards that are working in different parts of the architecture. We have the Greenhouse Gas Protocol doing the revision of the standards. For accounting, we are doing the revision of standards for target setting. Vera with implementation and how to do accounting for interventions. And we have, for instance, GRI in the advanced process of reporting standards. So there's a lot of pieces that are coming together, and we're trying to collaborate to try to have as much alignment as possible. And so my second recommendation would be, because you are at the forefront of implementation, to engage in these processes, because it's very useful for us to have your perspectives and to learn from the actions that you are taking to then bring to the standard setting process. So those are my
So don't hold back action. We need action now. And engage in those processes. We want your feedback. Great. Thanks, Alberto. Mandy, congratulations on the new job. It's a big job. We're all super excited to see what Vera is working on. A new era for Vera has been going on for a few months. Now you taking the lead is really exciting. And what's even more exciting is to see that Vera is also entering the Scope 3 space. With the VCI and SustainCert, we've always been searching for a standard that would help sort of regulate what's happening at the intervention level and complement what SBTi and greenhouse gas protocol are focusing on. So it's great to know that Vera is taking the lead there. Can you walk us through what you have on your roadmap for next year from a Scope 3 and value chain interventions perspective?
Sure, thank you, Marian, and it's so great to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you also to Pankaj and Alberto for laying the foundation of what it is we need to do. I was just thinking when I saw Laura walk into the room that we could actually have an SBTi Technical Council meeting here and get through all the discussions we need to get through. When I looked at that word cloud that we had earlier in your question too, I think it was, the two main words were data and traceability. And so when I look at what needs to be done is corporates want to have the data so that they have certainty, but also we need traceability. So we can, it's trust but verify, right? So we trust you, but we need to verify. So the traceability to enable claims is extremely important. So I'm very happy to say that Vera is standing up a Scope 3 program. And, I've been in the job now for a month and 2 weeks. So all credit to the team that has been working so hard on this. Abby is here if you have very difficult questions. It's great work that's been done by the team. So what we'll be doing is a Scope 3 program, which will include the program standard assessed methodologies, so VVB assessed methodologies, verification bodies, the auditing and certification system that goes along with that, and then a Scope 3 section on the Vera registry. So the full program that you've been used to, those of you who have used VCS know what the programs from Vera look like, and that is what we'll be standing up. The work has been going on for a while now, a couple of years, and we'll see it progressing over the next year.
Great, thank you for that, Mandy. And indeed, you said traceability and data are key issues, and by rolling out the Vera sort of know-how about how to design and implement programs, we can expect to see a lot of progress on those two fronts. So that's really, really exciting. So I'd love to take the discussion a bit closer to environmental attribute certificates, because those are instruments, as some of you may know, that can help overcome some of those traceability challenges. An environmental attribute certificate is an instrument that carries a claim, an environmental claim, that usually is verified or certified, and that allows the corporates to communicate about their sustainability achievements and impacts. So it's a topic that we've been following closely at SustainCert, and I'll use that opportunity to explain briefly who we are and what we do, in case you don't know us. SustainCert is a digital climate impact verification organization. So we operate in carbon markets where we verify carbon projects. So we verify Vera projects. We're a Vera accredited VVB. We're a certification body for gold standards, and we're also expanding into compliance market, including Article 6. And that knowledge that we've gained about verifying projects that are delivering climate impacts, we've been transferring it into the value chain space, and through the value chain initiative contributed to the creation of a Scope 3 ecosystem, where through our digital platform you can verify the impacts of your interventions on the ground and transform those tons of CO2 that were reduced or removed on the ground into emission factors that can be reported in your inventory, or narrative claims depending on the boundaries from which those impacts are coming from. And we've always considered that those instruments provide the flexibility that corporates need when traceability is limited. When you don't have the information all the way to the farm, you only know that you're sourcing from a specific region, and you still want to finance interventions at farm level, then those instruments can be helpful to unlock the rewards that corporates need to put money on the table and finance action. And so I'd love to hear from our three panelists about what's happening with environmental attribute certificates and what each of you can do to help create clarity and guidance so that corporates know that their investments will lead to rewards and progress towards their targets. So maybe starting with you, Pankaj, you started talking about the market-based mechanism work that the Greenhouse Gas Protocol is starting, I think, this month. Can you share a little bit about the specific objectives of this work? And how do you see the role of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol in incentivizing corporates taking action in those circumstances where traceability may not be possible? We'd love to hear more about the market-based mechanism roadmap and what we can expect from the Greenhouse Gas Protocol on those issues in the next months.
I think you covered it very well, very nicely. I think the background on this. The GHG protocol started in 1998, and we're in 2024, 26 years. And almost on an ongoing basis, there is always a debate. Are we accounting standard for the sake of accounting standard only, or are we accounting standard with a purpose? And so that's a very important conceptual clarity, that GHG protocol is an accounting standard with a purpose. It's it provides accounting methodologies And the purpose is that these methodologies will enable stronger action towards the, one might say, Paris Agreement or science, climate science, aligned with climate science. Now, this purpose is very, very broad, very big purpose. And we are only just maybe one small part of the equation in terms of what our contribution can be. And our contribution is to provide a solid accounting foundation for Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3, and now also for market instruments. And that itself, those, I think, companies here who are present will appreciate this, that the market needs clarity. Clarity is itself a strong incentive mechanism. You know, if there is confusion, then companies are not able to make proper decisions. So our job, and what I said in terms of purpose also, or in terms of incentives, is to provide these accounting rules. But there are some other additional incentives that can be provided by others, and we are not going to venture into that. SPTI could provide incentives, or VCMI or others, by laying out additional rules to direct action and to also direct recognition that will itself become an incentive. So coming back to our purpose, I think in the actions and market instruments work stream, we're starting a process to develop a new standard on actions and market instruments. I think there will be some work to standardize, as I said earlier, to standardize terminologies, definitions, methodologies, building off some of the very good work that has been done in this field. There will be greater emphasis on simplification and ease of implementation to enable, maybe that's another incentive to enable adoption and implementation. Traditionally, it has been very difficult for companies to use what is typically called consequential accounting practices. You know, you have to demonstrate additionality, you have to demonstrate causality, attribution. And we think that those principles will be still important, but we would work with experts and practitioners that how can we make them more streamlined and easier to implement. Maybe there are standardized approaches that will help in that regard. We also will provide framework for reporting, ensuring transparency on the different types of instruments and their accounting methods and limitations. And I don't know whether we will be able to do quite a lot in the 2 years that we are saying we want to publish. Many people have been waiting for some time, and we still say that 2 years. Every time I think when I say 2 years, you know, somebody reminded me last year also you said 2 years. And and I said 2 years from the date, or maybe we can say from the date when our governing bodies and technical working groups have been established. And so it actually took us much longer to complete the setup of the steering committee, ISB, Independent Standards Board, and technical working groups. Technical working groups will be announced very soon, maybe next week. And so we start the clock, and we hope to provide some useful guidance in 2 years' time. Thank you.
And you'll come next year to give us an update on where you are. Thanks for that, Pankaj. Alberto, I won't ask you if the net zero standard is going to allow EACs or not, because I know you cannot respond to that question. And that response is probably not written yet. But what I would love to hear from you is about the evidence base, right? Because the SBTI did a thorough analysis and review of the evidence base on carbon credits earlier this year, which was published. Can you give us some insights around the type of evidence that SBTI would want to see in order to be reassured that those market instruments, that EACs can play a really important role?
Yeah, thanks, Marion. Well, I can definitely describe what we are exploring in the comprehensive standard. Of course, what comes out of the process is a result of the process. I think pretty much in line with what Pankaj mentioned, I think the most important is to provide clarity, right? Because we know it's critical to provide clarity, And also, as we move from the ambition to implementation aspects of the standard, we also need that clarity, because we're going to reach the point of assessing what happened with targets, and then those aspects need to be clarified, right? So I would say that's really the main goal that we are really looking, or the main goal that we have around this topic. Then we started, as you mentioned, a process, first of all, to understand what is the landscape of evidence that exists around this topic, because of course there's a lot of opinions, but we are a science-based and an evidence-based standards setting organization. And so we want to understand what is the evidence that is available about the effectiveness of different instruments. We conducted a call for evidence last year. We invited the public to submit evidence on these different instruments. What we've been doing this year has been to analyze the evidence. We published all the evidence. It's available on our website, all the evidence that we received. We published the summary of the evidence for the first type of instruments, that is carbon credits, on our website also. In July, we are working now on the analysis of the other type of instruments, and we also publish it. And then based on that, we are going to inform how this can be brought into the standard. And finally, also reflecting on the point that you said, Marion, it's very important to have robust instruments that can provide the MRV that is necessary for implementation and interventions. And so, yeah, we hope all of this process helps provide that, but also helps provide companies the tools that they need to demonstrate the impact that their actions are taking, so they can make claims that can be sustained.
Yeah. Thanks, Alberto, and really great to hear that you're working closely with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol so that your processes will feed each other's. Collaboration is key in that space. All of us know what the task ahead of us is, and all of us, either individually or through our organizations, have a role to play. And with the Value Change Initiative, we're very happy to be working with SBTi, Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and Vera already on shaping the future of Scope 3 accounting. And today, we are super excited to announce a new collaboration in that space, a collaboration that is designed to accelerate clarity that corporates need, but also clarify the bar and the level of integrity we all expect for environmental attribute certificates or market instruments that can be generated by project interventions and taken into a corporate Scope 3 inventory. And this is a new collaboration between SustainCert and Vera. Mandy was super happy to be announcing this collaboration today. Would you like to share a few words about your perspective on this work that we're starting today?
Sure, thanks, Marion, and really excited about announcing this as well. We've been hearing the whole week. We've been here 3 days, right? We've been hearing the whole week. Every single panel talks about collaboration. How are we collaborating in this market? How are we going to collaborate so that we bring some sanity to some of the disparate views that we see? So we've just finalized a memorandum of understanding with SustainCert. And the collaboration will connect the program I just spoke about, so our Scope 3 program, to SustainCert's auditing and reporting capabilities. And our goal really is to scale. We want to see how we scale this market and advance climate action in that respect. So what will we work together on? We're going to work together on standardizing terminology and definitions in this space. I know we have so many different words that fly around this market that people's eyes glaze over when we talk about it. So we want to have standardization around that. We will work very closely on communications and the narrative so that when we go out to the market, when we talk to people about Scope 3 and what it is we're doing to scale credible action in this Scope 3 space, that we are very clear in terms of what we mean. And then very importantly, we will create an interface between our registry and SustainCert's Vivid platform. So very happy to be working with you on that, Marion.
Likewise, thank you, Mandy, and really excited to be, to see more collaborations happen in this space to accelerate the speed at which we can reach our common goal. Is there a few words you would like to share, Mandy, specifically on environmental attribute certificates and how you see them play a role at scale to accelerate decarbonization, and perhaps also speaking from Vera, and of course Vera being a leading major carbon market standard. And we all know that there are limitations around what carbon credits can be used for. And so from that perspective, it's really interesting that Vera is creating new options for Vera projects to possibly find new markets with Scope 3 accounting. So we'd love to hear a bit more about your perspective on EACs and how they contribute to scaling market mechanisms beyond what we're used to, i.e. carbon credits.
Sure, thanks, Marion. Very importantly, I think if we look at the numbers, I think the last time I looked, Scope 3 was about 75% of emissions. So it's a very high number, and a lot of companies are asking, how do we deal with Scope 3 emissions? It's a complex area, and what is it that we can do to create trust and integrity in the market that we're actually dealing with this in a way that can be trusted? We are very clear, and we say this quite often, that companies must deal with Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, right? We all say that, all of us. But there is an element of Scope 3 that plays an important role, like I say, 75%, that we absolutely need to deal with. So where the importance comes in is that together with a very robust standard, with a standard of high integrity, you need a traceability model so that companies can make claims. And I think so that is the point around the Scope 3, is how are you able to trust the claims that companies make? And so it's important for us to do this work, to do the work around the Scope 3 program, and to have a traceability model so that those claims can be made. We're also linking the Scope 3 work that we're doing, the piloting of the work, to existing VCS programs that you're maybe familiar with methodologies, so that we can look at that full value chain, that full supply chain of dealing with your emissions along the Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 value chain. So I think this piloting work in a couple of countries around the world is going to be extremely important to answer a lot of these questions on how do we provide traceability, how do we ensure that claims can be trusted. And so hopefully, this program will be able to be used in that way. And the end result is resulting in scale.
Yeah. Thanks. And scale and tons of CO2 in the ground, or less tons of CO2 in the atmosphere, so that we all progress towards those climate goals. I want to make sure we have time for your questions. So we'll take a few. And as you think about the questions you want to ask, I'm going to turn back to the panel very quickly. And I would love to hear from you one simple sentence about what you'd love, what you want your organization to have achieved, be it 2 years from now or 5 years from now. We know what the stakes are. Where do you, as SBTi, Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and Vera, want to be in 2 or 5 years from now? What's your goal? What is the impact, the achievements you want to have reached? So we'll start with the panel, and then we'll take questions. Alberto, you want to start?
I mean, for us, it's simple because it's in the tagline of our logo, which is driving credible climate action.
How do you measure that in 2 years from now, specifically?
Well, then that gets complicated.
Like, okay. It was short, but
you asked for one sentence, so the one sentence it was simple.
I mean, fair enough. Yeah, one sentence. Great. Pankaj.
I think if I have to imagine 5 years from now, I would like that the carbon accounting standards become well integrated in financial accounting. I think that progress has already started with ISSB, and we just want that to become mandatory for companies all over the world.
Great. Mandy.
It's to reduce uncertainty and risk that we currently have in the market, so that we have more investment and we scale at a point where we actually can see the difference we're making to climate, which is ultimately why we're here.
Thanks, Mandy. Awesome. All right, so the floor is yours. So we'll take a few questions together. That way we can cover more. So I think, Karen, you had one. Then I see Lucia, and you're at the front. Oh yes, we have the QR. So this is high-tech event. So there's a QR code actually. So you can scan it and put your questions there, and so we'll tackle a few of them. But we will also take questions live in the room. So we're doing both. Yeah, old school and new school. So can we have the mic? Yeah, okay, great. Lucia and then Karen.
Yeah, I think I skipped the line with Karen. Karen, do you want to?
It's fine, go ahead.
That's fine, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm Lucia, I'm with Regrow Ag, and I had the good fortune today of working with the VCI Food and Ag Working Group to think through case studies of how do you apply GHGP LSRG to various case studies for crop supply chains. And we kind of realized that focusing strictly on inventory-based Scope 3 reporting resulted in quite a restricted or limited end state in which there's only a small amount of interventions, cover cropping, tillage, nutrient management, that you can apply to your small portion of your industrial monoculture that you happen to source. And there's a lot of talk of stranded assets, and people just weren't particularly excited about that being the only end state you're able to apply. And so what do you see as sort of the right path forward, a mechanism or methodology for allowing more landscape level initiatives within the supply shed, such as restoring a degraded wetland, or maybe transitioning some degraded fields over to forests, or diversifying crop rotations, or some of these, maybe they're still in your supply shed, but they're outside of just your little piece of corn in your corporate inventory.
Great. Thanks, Lucia, for that really good question. Karen, do you want to go next? We'll take a few questions and then we'll respond together.
Thanks, Naomi. Okay, this might be a little provocative, Mandy. I'm on your Scope 3 working group, too. So Vera is building this long-term monitoring program. 2 years ago, when this community practice of ECI was gathered, it came from the floor a call to action. Why would all these corporates build their own monitoring programs? Could there not be a collective monitoring program for Scope 3? I understand that maybe on the offset side after the longevity period ends, then you may take over the monitoring if no one wants to continue with the project. But for Scope 3, I see that long-term monitoring program being very, very valuable to this community. And I wonder if it's, Vera's willing to take on that risk for Scope 3. Could you do it sooner, right? Because there's no longevity period.
All right, thank you, Karen. And I think we had one more question from the lady at the front. And then we can also look at the questions over here. And if there's one that you'd like to answer, please be my guest.
Hi, my question is for Alberto. I'm Elena from Suzano. Suzano is the global leader on the pulp and paper sector. Thanks so much for the updates. Really impressive to see how much progress we've been making with SBTI across the years. I'm eager for so much more update, specifically on the flag. I know some of the components of the flag tool has been put on hold or suspended for further review, including the timber and wood fiber component. So any updates on the progress on this review, and when can we expect to see a revised tool?
Thank you. So what I propose in the interest of time is that each of our panelists sort of respond to the questions that were directed to you and the questions that you feel are relevant from the screen. Alberto, we start with you once more.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. And for those of you that don't have full context, we launched our flag guidance in 2023. That includes a number of pathways for different agricultural commodities. And one of these agricultural commodities, or one of these pathways, is addressing emissions for timber and wood. And after having launched the tool and the pathway and the guidance, we realized that there are some circumstances in which the pathway doesn't work. And so what we are doing now is we are in the research phase to understand how to address these. We rely on the availability of pathways from basically groups that produce models. And And so we really depend on what is available in terms of climate models. So that's where we're doing that research. And we're planning to start formally the process for the revision of the pathway towards the end of this year, beginning of next year. And so it's a very similar process to what we follow for standard setting. There's going to be a shorter consultation period, and after that, we're going to receive feedback, and then after that, we're going to implement the revised pathway. So that's the status. And of course, we hope also in the meantime to be able to incorporate the latest from the greenhouse gas protocol on this topic.
And do you want to touch also, Alberto, on the landscape level question? Because that was one of the potential hints that were mentioned in the value chain paper in terms of type of scope 3 target. Is this something that you would like to address as well?
Can you?
The question from Lucia on landscape level approaches and how do we create sort of broader incentive structures for corporates to take action?
I definitely think there's a need for us to rethink about the metrics that are more effective to drive the transformation that we want to see. Greenhouse gas emissions accounting is a tool that helps us understand the impact from different activities in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. But there are also other metrics that we should look at that can be more effective in driving certain type of actions. We started introducing some of this thinking in the Scope 3 paper that we released over the summer, and we are definitely keen to continue the exploration of alternative metrics that can help us drive Paris-aligned transformation, because we know that, greenhouse gas emissions has to be the impact metric that we use, because otherwise there's no way to ensure that impact is actually happening. But there are other metrics that we also look at, so yeah, definitely agree with that.
Thanks, Alberto. Pankaj.
Maybe I can also add to the question about some of the activities that are not captured well in the inventory approach, right? That was your question, right? Which is true. And we, again, maybe on a journey that now the next phase is to add some important standards that will help to clarify and incentivize stronger push for intervention accounting outside the value chain in a way that is not seen as too cumbersome and difficult to be implemented and then loses value and is not adopted. At the same time, I think we also would very much welcome researchers and experts to undertake such case studies and to demonstrate that how, what's the scale of difference. For example, in particular sector, you're saying inside the inventory and outside the inventory, what's the difference and how we're missing some important opportunities. I think that will be very valuable. The final point, I'm actually amazed that you have such a great audience here. I sometimes wonder why people are so interested in accounting. Accounting is perhaps one of the least preferred profession for people. So when I become a little bit of an expert in accounting, and when you get deeper into these things, so when you get into intervention, accounting of benefits outside the value chain, let's say, accounting of benefits. So for us, as soon as you come into that level of a benefit accounting, the accountant will ask, what about the costs? What about the costs outside the value chain? What about negative impacts outside the value chain? Because again, the risk here is somewhat is cherry picking also, with respect to identifying benefits that you're able to provide through company activities that we can see, even with avoided emissions concept. So there's one paper that we did in GHG protocol that the title was not exactly avoided emissions, but positive and negative impact of actions outside your value chain. So a complete accounting should look into both. And I think when we do the fourth work stream, we'll try to address it. And if you permit me, I wanted to just quickly answer one of the other questions here. The scope 4 is many times mentioned. But we don't want to encourage that concept for the same reason that I was just now explaining. Scope 4 generally is introduced as a way to begin to count avoided emissions, or what I would say one side of the equation only. So if we were to plan something like that, we may not call it Scope 4, because the other 3 scopes are typically inventory accounting scopes. The life cycle accounting is what is reflected in Scope 1, 2, and 3. And so you have completed life cycle accounting. There's no particular additional inventory accounting element that is left outside the Scope 3. And so if we start using Scope 4, it conceptually doesn't go with the rest of the scopes. And then also the idea that it's meant to count only one part of the impacts is also an error. But of course, we may introduce a new category through the 4th workstream, and we don't know what that might be called.
Thank you, Pankaj. And I know, Mandy, you have to go very soon. Would you like to cover the question from Karen?
Karen knows my previous life, what job I did, so there's nothing challenging, right, in questions that I have to field. But I think in developing the Scope 3 work, we spoke about the program, which will cover a suite of things, which is the methodology, the standard, the auditing, and then also what's very important from the question around monitoring is this collaboration we're going to have with SustainCert. So I'm very keen on seeing how that unfolds and how we cover some of that monitoring. Yeah, so I think it's important, it's crucial, but it's where it needs collaboration, and collaboration such as ours will be very useful for that.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. Please join me in thanking our great panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy, Pankaj, and Alberto.